The committee shall come to order. First, some administrative and technical notes for virtual participants, which I guess is somewhat of a moot point right now. So, well, basically, we all know what the game plan is, which is you got to stay on camera and you know, mute when you're not talking, and if you've got a problem, email or text the clerks, and they'll take care of it. And I'll enter the FedEx statement for the record. That's right. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, good morning to our witnesses. I really want to begin by thanking you for the early start this morning. When we're about to go on a 2-week break, and when we come back, we're going to be, you know, really on the precipice of markup. So we really wanted to try and get this hearing in and give members a chance to spend some time uninterrupted by floor votes, and that's why we kind of imposed on you to join us early this morning. We did it yesterday with the Navy, and again, I think everyone felt it was a good process. So again, thank you for being here today. And in the interest of you know, moving right in, I'm going to enter my opening statement and remarks for the record, and I'm going to yield to Mr. Whitman, the ranking member, for any comments he wants to make, and then again, we'll take opening statements and begin questions. So again, look forward to your input today, and I now will yield to the ranking member, Rob Whitman from Virginia.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am going to enter my remarks for the record so that we can get underway and hear from our witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. And I don't know which one of you gentlemen, Mr. Hunter, it's good to see you back in your old bailiwick. And again, the floor is yours for your opening statement. You'll be followed by General Nail.
If I'm not, oh, here we go. Thank you. Well, you've appropriately challenged us to say that the Navy succeeded in doing this yesterday. And at least in General Nahome's case, I think we'll be up to the challenge of meeting their standard and hopefully exceeding it. But Chairman Courtney and Ranking Member Whitman and members of the subcommittee, thank you for having General Nahome and myself here to provide testimony on the Air Force's fiscal year 2023 budget request for Projection Forces aviation programs and capabilities. In recent years, the Air Force's combat advantage over our potential peer adversaries has been under pressure. As a nation, we've simply fallen behind the rate of technological advancement demonstrated by global competitors, and we are working with great vigor to continue to maintain and extend our lead in the areas where we have it, and to close the gap in areas where we don't. With the completion of the 2022 National Defense Strategy, the strategic direction given to the United States Air Force is clear. We must modernize our projection forces and capabilities to overcome the pacing challenges posed by the People's Republic of China and deter the threats of other strategic competitors. These challenges drove us to focus on 7 operational imperatives, which are reflected in our budget request and continue to drive decision-making now and going forward. The Air Force is faced with a number of tough decisions to strike balance between short-term and future risks, but this budget request is a result of a thoughtful and deliberative process that responds to the rapidly evolving threat our airmen and guardians have been called upon to deter and defeat within our resources. Therefore, our FY23 budget request aims to accelerate the development of a more modern and operationally relevant fighting force, delivering capabilities to the warfighter at the pace with which the current strategic environment demands by balancing along several axes: current capacity versus modernized capabilities, standoff versus stand-in capabilities, and mass approaches versus high-end solutions. As you'll see in our 2023 budget submission, nuclear modernization has been ranked the Air Force's #1 priority. GBSD, LRSO, and B-21 are key to the Air Force plan. Aerial refueling plays a critical role in our ability to deliver a decisive advantage in pure warfighting, and the capacity our fleet offers makes this projection possible for both the joint force and for our allies. In order to successfully project power and sustain this advantage, it's critical that we deliberately modernize our tanker fleet through continuous recapitalization of the KC-135s, procurement of the KC-46. Keeping KC-10 divestment actions on track will not only free up ramp space to allow for the delivery of KC-46, but it will also free up the airmen we need to build the KC-46 into the capability the taxpayer has paid for. Our investments in our airlift capabilities have paid tremendous dividends in recent years. Our airlift fleet is the envy of air forces around the world, and this year's budget continues to invest in the C-5, C-17, and C-130 fleets. Let me speak a little bit about my own approach coming in now as the Air Force Acquisition Executive. Since my arrival to the Air Force earlier this month, I've begun work with the SAF AQ team to assess our current programs, such as the KC-46, and evaluate ongoing efforts to adapt acquisition policies and processes to meet the pacing challenge. In the early stages, this is involving a number of initial focus areas, including delivering operational capabilities to the warfighter and meeting current and future needs, something that is also a huge focus for the Secretary. Modernizing our nuclear enterprise to ensure safe and reliable, credible nuclear deterrent. Sustaining our complex and aging Air Force fleet, such as the A-10, which we are rewinging, and new capabilities that we plan to field. Fielding innovative new capabilities, especially acquiring software and software-intensive systems, advancing capabilities for digital acquisition, including through digital engineering, strengthening and securing our supply chains, and supporting and developing the acquisition workforce. Throughout the coming weeks, my team will be engaging with our department leadership, the PEOs who work for me, and with industry to establish clear priorities for the acquisition enterprise so that we can drive towards a common goal. Once set, I welcome the opportunity to share those priorities with this subcommittee and answer any questions you may have. And I look forward to working with this subcommittee to ensure the Department of the Air Force maintains sufficient military advantage to secure our vital national interests and support our allies and partners in fiscal year 2023 and beyond. And Lieutenant General Nahom and I stand ready to address your questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. And again, congratulations on your new position. Again, I know a lot of members that are here today are going to have questions on the tanker recapitalization program, so I'm going to let them have that opportunity to have a dialogue with you this morning on that point. One program which, again, this subcommittee's been involved in over the last number of years is the Air Force One replacement program, recapitalization program, the VC-25B. And there's been setbacks, as you know already, in the last few years. And now multiple reports are emerging that the schedule is going to slip an additional 17 months and possibly longer. Again, I just, if you could sort of just tell us and update us regarding the status of this, because we really are kind of way off the initial plan in terms of replacing that platform.
You are correct, sir. We are anticipating at this point a delay to the previously approved program schedule on the order of 24 to 36 months, so 2 to 3 years, which is obviously quite a significant delay. And so we're working through how to do that. A lot of it was with, there was a subcontractor, I know you're aware, that was not able to get the job done in terms of the interior of the aircraft and some of the modifications there. And that significantly pushed the schedule back, the work that wasn't able to be accomplished and the effort required to bring in someone else to do that work. So we are looking at a 2 to 3 year delay in the schedule to deliver the IOC aircraft to the Air Force, and that means that we will have to sustain the existing aircraft for longer. And we are posturing to do that and going to be looking in our FY24 budget build process and as we execute in FY23 to put in place the resources necessary to cover the gap.
So, I mean, the subcontractor problems, it's been around for a while, and I mean, has the Air Force just not, or has Boeing not been able to find a substitute, or are they going to be taking the work, within their own industrial base? I mean, do we have any idea what the plan is?
I think it's a mix of the two things you discussed, Boeing doing some additional work itself, but also bringing on other subcontractors to help with the effort. And I think some of this is, as you say, this problem has been known for some time. It takes a while for the full schedule implications to be understood, so there is a little bit of a delay in recognizing the schedule shift after the, as you say, the critical problem which occurred some time ago. But I believe they now have the plans in place to execute to this new updated schedule.
And do we have kind of a guesstimate about what the cost implications are for, the delay and the rearranging of the work?
I would like to get back to you for the record on what the exact estimate is, but we believe we can probably take care of it in terms of resources that we have within the program. Although, as I said, there may be you may see some changes in the upcoming 24 budget requests compared to what we had previously programmed for those VC25A.
Right. Well, we'd appreciate that update. And I'll yield to the ranking member, Mr. Whitman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Lieutenant General Nahom, do you believe that the Air Force, their force structure is optimally aligned to deal with the tyranny of distance in the Indo-PACOM? And tell me where you believe our long-range strike capabilities are and in what they exist today in long-range enablers, and are those properly reflected in the budget request?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for the question. I get probably a little biased, but first I'll say I think the Air Force is probably the most equipped for the tyranny of distance, the way we operate with our long-range equipment, the bombers, the tankers, and the like. I think our budget really does reflect that Indo-PACOM shift and focus. And if you look at where we're invested in things that do apply to the long-range fight and that tyranny of distance, whether it's B-21, KC-46, certainly when you start looking at our next generation air dominance family of systems, with the Pacific in mind, as well as many of our long-range weapons under development, both hypersonic, and you also you can see that we've maximized existing weapons that give us some of that long-range strike, like the JASSM-ER. I think we are focused on the Pacific. The Secretary's operational imperatives focus us on the Pacific and making sure that we can not only meet the warfight demand, but get there over long distances. And that also includes basing. You talk about agile combat employment and places we're going to need to operate in an environment that's much different from Europe or the Middle East or other places we've been focused on in the past.
Mr. Hunter, I wanted to go to a statement that was given to us by Secretary Kendall. He recently said, "I love competition. I'm all for it. It's the best tool I have to reduce cost." Do you support Secretary Kendall's belief in the value of competition?
I do.
Okay. If long-range strike capabilities, which I believe are essential to Indo-PACOM, are really at the forefront of what we need to do as a force, do you believe in the inherent value of competition? And if that's the case, as you've stated that you do, then why would the Air Force be walking away from competition on KCY?
Well, sir, we haven't made a decision about what we would be doing with KCY at this point. We're still awaiting input from the requirements community on what exactly is the requirement for the KCY aircraft family, and also understanding a business case analysis. So gathering all the information and data about what the cost of various options would be, and then a decision will be made. And I guess I'm lucky enough to be the one who gets to try to bring those facts together and come to either a decision that we would work with the Secretary on. So the decision has not been made, and we're going to gather and evaluate all that feedback. I do think that this requirements piece is really critical, and I think competition works well when it's driving innovation, and obviously also can work well to control costs. But to my mind, competition is most helpful to us when we're looking to acquire something where that innovation and where we don't know as much about cost, and using the competitive pressures to incentivize industry to deliver on cost-effective approaches is really helpful.
Well, I hope as you go through and gather this information on requirements and the needs in the next generation tanker aircraft, it seems like to me that the place that would bring you is right to Secretary Kendall's statement about competition. I think there are very few instances where competition would not be of value to the nation and to the Air Force. So I hope that that's reflected in your decision.
It will be, sir. And the one other thing I would note is we also, to your point about the criticality of our projection forces to the fight in Indo-PACOM, is we want to make sure we continue to deliver capability to the warfighter without interruption.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. And Mr. Hunter, congratulations. Good to have you here. I just want to follow up on what my colleague was talking about, the KCY and the requirements. And quite a bit of what we're discussing focuses around what that is going to look like, and quite frankly, beyond that, particularly given how the Indo-PACOM arena has changed in many ways. What we are going to need to perform there is always a challenge, and this is no different. But as we're looking forward on the KCY, those requirements, competition, there's no doubt about that, but it's also about when we can deliver that next generation, forgive me, that next generation requirements. So how do you blend those together? You have to deliver a requirement, and we know there's a date out there by 27, what we have to have and that competition. And in particular, let's talk about the tanker here. Give me your view on that, and are we going to be able to put this out for competition in that short amount of time that we have to deliver?
Yeah, and the balance, I think you've characterized that well. So when it comes to our near-term requirement and our longer-term requirements, there could be some difference between those and the time frame associated with those. As you know, the plan has been was for KCX, then KCY, and then a KCZ. And I think we're looking at the timelines of all of those to understand what's the right mix now, because that plan was formulated probably a decade ago, and the environment has evolved substantially since then. So I think what we're seeing is the need for something like KCZ is growing more urgent over time. And that's definitely part of our calculus and part of our mix is we want a posture to deliver the warfighter the capability they need in the 2020s timeframe, which we're doing by fielding KCX and examining our alternatives for when the KCX line that's currently under contract would reach the number of aircraft that are currently under contract. And then when do we want to deliver the capability that's going to allow us to address emerging threats in the Indo-PACOM, and just putting all of that in the mix and trying to formulate the right answer.
We all want value for what we're going to buy, but we have a timing issue. And when this program started, which is much longer than any of us had expected, the world looked very different there on how we were going to get there. But thank you for your feedback. Lieutenant General Nahum, great to have you here. I know the clock is ticking for you personally, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate what you've done, not only for this committee, but for our country. Talk to me about the KC-46 and its deployment in Europe. How did we do there?
Sir, I would say, first of all, it performed very well. And the KC-46 now, we're up to 85% of our aircraft we can refuel with it now, which is a huge increase from last year. When we were here last year at this time, we were really only certified refueling drogue aircraft, the Navy aircraft. Now, 85% of the fleet, most of the fleet that we cannot refuel is more based on the boom stiffness issue with some of the underpowered airplanes, A-10, C-130s and the like. The crews that fly it are very excited about that airplane and not only the capability, what they see now, but what this airplane could grow into be. The crews that refuel, I've talked to many crews that have been refueling off the airplane too, and they're very impressed with the performance of that airplane. It has some issues that we're working through right now. We have workarounds on those. We do need to continue our work with Boeing to get those fixed. But the way it's performing now has been performing very well, and we're looking forward to getting the full capability in the very near future of that airplane.
Thank you. Just Secretary Hunter, before I finish up on KC-46, is it safe to say in this environment, and it's an open source here, It has the ability to perform in its configuration to do things that we might ask it to do under the new requirements? Boy,
It
that
has-
was a nice, deep question that we can't talk about here. It's prepared for that next generation of equipment.
It is capable of refueling our most advanced aircraft that are currently in the force today. When our newer aircraft arrive, we will qualify them to refuel with the KC-46 as soon as we possibly can through flight test. And I don't have significant concerns, frankly, that will be successful based on the performance that it's had with the current fleet. I think 85% of the air tasking requirements that we've seen for air refueling today, the KC-46 is authorized to engage and carry those out, and as the
Thank
General
you, Mr.
said, they've
President.
been successful.
Okay, we'll
I
wrap
yield
up
back.
there. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Norcross. Chair now recognizes Mr. Carl.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You shouldn't have kept us up so late last night. It'll be a little more sparky. Morning, gentlemen. General, I got a quick question here before I go to my other questions. You were proud of the 85% that we're at on this bomber. Sir, would you buy a car that worked 85% of the time?
Sir, I think as you look at the KC-46, we're making incredible progress with the airplane.
But the question is would you buy a car that worked 85% of the time?
Sir, I would, if the car didn't work all the time, I would certainly work with the manufacturer to get it to work.
That's not a good answer. We both know that. We've got an aircraft that's working 85% of the time. Am I correct to say that it cannot refuel our long-range bombers?
Right now, sir, with 85, and without getting into the specifics here, it can refuel the majority of the aircraft that we need it to refuel right now. And
But how about our long-range bombers?
Sir, it is able to refuel the long-range bomber, so we can get back to you on the record for
You said
exactly what
yes?
aircraft are currently still in work to be refueled.
Okay, so the answer is no then. What's the answer, yes or no?
My understanding is that it does refuel long-range bombers.
Well, the information I've got says it does not, but we'll move on. Mr. Hunter, as you can tell, I'm extremely concerned about the government's waste of money, especially in this project. We've got an aircraft that's working 85% of the time, and we're proud that we brought it from, I think, 71 or 72% to 85. And we're putting all of our eggs in one basket, dealing with one manufacturer. You've got this VC-25B, I believe, if I got the Air Force One. Now they're falling behind on that. This KC-46 is years behind, and yet we still feel comfortable putting more business in their lap. I think we're extremely in a dangerous position in this country when we put all of our fixed wings into one company's lap. And I'm really getting curious why. Because it's not because of their delivery time. If it's all based on cost, guess what? If it costs more on the other end and if it takes longer to get it, trust me, saving a few dollars is not the way to go. Now, you've got an aircraft here that does not and cannot compete with the Airbus Lockheed plane that's going to come up for bid, and I challenge you not to rebid it. Because if it comes out and it's not being rebid, you're going to see this room go ballistic, because there's no reason why we shouldn't. I'll leave that there. I'm sorry. The KC-46, let's go back to it. Considering the aircraft is now backtracked and the panoramic camera fix and the services will be paid for, the sensors by the taxpayers will bear the burden of the cost of that upgrade and that fix. Why should we, the taxpayers, pay for something that's supposed to have worked when it was delivered?
So, sir, just briefly on the 85%, that was 85% of the tasking orders can be performed by the KC-46. If those tasking orders can't be done by the KC-46, they'll be assigned to other aircraft. The KC-46 would still function and be able to do the aircraft that it's able to refuel. So I didn't.
Got a limited amount of time.
I didn't mean
here.
to mislead you on that.
Why should the taxpayers pay for this?
On the panoramic camera issue, so we identified after the what's called the PDR, the preliminary design review, that the Warfighter was not satisfied with the performance of the panoramic cameras in the back. And so we negotiated with Boeing to do a upgrade to that system. What Boeing agreed to do was to do all of the software work and all the development work to deliver those new cameras and to plumb the infrastructure for those cameras to
But
be
I understand
installed.
the cameras that are there now will not work at dark and will not work in weather. Is that correct?
That is not my understanding of what the deficiency is. I think it's more of a acuity, a sharpness of the image, and how that meets their
So
expectation.
they can't see what they're looking at. Either way, it's a product that's not working for us.
So the Air Force agreed that it would take on the cost of installing actual cameras, which as of yet we have not decided whether we will actually install those
So the
additional
taxpayers
cameras.
are paying to upgrade something that was supposed to work originally. That makes a lot of sense. I've been in business for years. Trust me. That makes no sense in my mind. Zero. I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be picking on you here, but let's move on real quick. Give us a layout of the timeline that the decision will be made on whether to bid out this KCY tanker or not.
We're going to have to just hold that answer for the second round, because there will be,
Thank you,
given
Mr.
the early
Chair.
start
Excuse
here.
me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. The chair now recognizes Mrs. Garcia of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both witnesses for being here this morning. This is my first crack at the wheel in this committee, and I don't have a lot of questions today because I really do need to visit with you all to get a kind of a briefing and background before I can sink my teeth into some of this. But just wanted to say that I'm proud that my family is an Air Force family. You know, growing up poor in South Texas, there was few options for many of my brothers. They either continue to work on the farms the rest of their lives, or they join the military. And my three oldest brothers all decided to join the Air Force. So I have visited many bases throughout the country, and I have always enjoyed my stay there. For me in Houston, the only thing close to us is Ellington Field, which is not used as much as it used to, and we lost the fighter jets that used to be there some years ago, going through the BRAC process and some other things. And I recall, I think it was when I was city controller at the time at the city of Houston, going to some of those meetings. So I have sort of a back view of some of the things that go on with the Air Force, but certainly not enough today to ask you some hard questions. But I would remind you all that I have been the city controller for the city of Houston, so numbers and financial statements do not scare me. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Ms. Garcia, and we look forward to your participation and really appreciate the story you shared with us this morning. Our next member is Mr. Gallagher from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's talk a little bit about maritime strike. My understanding is the Air Force is investing in El Razum on B-1s. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there any plan for a similar maritime strike capability to be fielded on B-21, B-2, or B-52?
Sir, maritime strike is a focus, especially when you look at the China warfight, and we're looking at maritime strike on many platforms. And I certainly can get to a classified session. I'd like to, and we can expand on this conversation.
Is there anything in an unclassified setting you could say about the most promising employment of maritime strike, particularly within the sort of stand-in force or standoff force concept you mentioned earlier?
Sir, I'd have to be very, very careful about that conversation in an unclassified session. But I tell you, it is something that we and our joint partners are going to need to do well in any conflict in the South China Sea.
When we talk about not just the South China Sea, but more broadly throughout Indo-PACOM, agile combat employment, or are we calling it ACE or ACE, or what's the?
ACE, Agile Combat Employment, sir.
The new rule is that every new acronym must also result in the subtraction of 2 acronyms. So I'm going to submit that as an NDA amendment. But ACE is a relatively uncomplicated one, so I'll allow that. Okay, maybe in layman's terms, non-acronym layman's terms, describe what the ACE vision is, and if we went to war with China over Taiwan tomorrow, is ACE logistically supportable as presently conceived and funded?
Sir, and we are funding in new ACE concepts moving forward. We actually do ACE in many places, and you look at what we're doing, what we have done in Europe in exercises, and what we're doing in the Pacific in exercises. We are actually doing a lot of ACE concepts right now. The idea of not being in one concentrated area, not building up that iron mountain in one location and giving multiple dilemmas to an adversary. It is, I'll tell you, when you said the word logistics, that is the challenge. And I've done this in the Pacific in my time there, in the F-15 and the F-22 with organizations. And that is the thing we spend the most time talking about is we're going to go out to a certain location. How do we get spare parts? How do we get fuel? How do we get munitions? These things are overcomable, but we're going to have to work at them, and it does take some investment. I think you'll see that reflected in our budget.
Do we have the requisite basing agreements that make ACE possible in the Indo-Pacific? Is that one of the logistical constraints, or no?
There, I tell you that, and that is a challenge with certain areas in the Pacific. It's a little different in Europe when we have something that bounds us, NATO and other agreements. In the Pacific, there's a lot of places that it is possible right now because there's some islands and places that we have access to. There's also other countries that we regularly work with, our very close allies, the Japanese, the Australians, and others. But certainly, you're going to have to expand that out to other partners and allies, and that is work that's being done.
Well, there's a lot of U.S. territory that has not been garrisoned or hardened. Furthermore, the compact states seem desperate for further cooperation with us, but we seem to be missing a massive opportunity to seize. I don't know. I would welcome a further classified discussion on the first topic I asked about. And is there an authoritative sort of document that lays out the ACE vision with specific reference to the Indo-Pacific?
Sir, let me take that one for the record.
Okay.
Find out what I can get you for that.
I'm trying to be antagonistic. I'm interested in understanding it more. Quickly, Mr. Hunter, there was a concerning Wall Street Journal story the other week that found that China is using state-sponsored methods to target companies that received SBIRS funding. I don't know if you saw this. If not, I guess there won't be an answer to this. But if so, could you perhaps comment on how the Air Force protects SBIR research from Chinese espionage and sort of any other thoughts you had in reaction to that story?
Sir, I am familiar with that article, and as you say, it is concerning, and of course it fits a pattern, a long-term pattern of efforts by China to obtain intellectual property and technology from the United States. It's been going on, and that will continue. The Air Force has developed sort of vetting processes for our SBIR awards in order to make sure that we are comfortable with the possibility of those efforts being pursued against companies in which we would be making investments. We think the processes that the Air Force is using are some of the most effective that are currently in use in the federal government, and so, but we are looking to see what we can do to make them even better and also work with the interagency and with our DoD partners to extend those.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Chair now recognizes Ms. Jacobs, who's joining us remotely.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, I want to start with you. First, I want to congratulate you and the 22nd Air Refueling Wing for the historic flight that lasted over 24 hours. With that said, refueling requirements have been a growing concern with myself and other members of Congress, as I think you've heard a lot in this hearing, with the retirement of the KC-10 and the delay in the production of the KC-46. So what is the Air Force currently doing to mature the refueling system? Specifically, when will the remote vision systems and aerial refueling boom fixes be expected to be approved and installed? And the KC-46 tankers will have to be pulled from flight operations in order to retrofit the new remote video systems and boom. What's the Air Force doing to mitigate flight operations and missions across the globe when the aircraft boom is getting fixed?
Ma'am, we anticipate that the RVS 2.0 upgrade that will resolve most of the issues that we have with the refueling system will be ready to be installed, to start being installed. We'll complete this development in 2024. and we will then expeditiously move out to install those fixes right away. But of course, it will take some time to get them installed across the entire fleet. Most of that work will probably be accomplished when aircraft are going into depot, and we'll, of course, immediately install the new equipment on the aircraft that are starting to come off the line at that point, that are being delivered as, that we'll be accepting once that design is complete. So it'll happen at a steady pace. We'll work to minimize any possible disruption to operations as those fixes are being installed.
Okay, thank you. I know, again, to you, General Nahum, the bomber roadmap has changed a few times in the last few years. What's the latest bomber retirement plan and proposed total number of bombers?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. And I tell you, the bomber roadmap has been pretty steady for the last, at least the last 2 years. We are really achieving to get to a 2-bomber fleet with the B-21 and the modified B-52. The exact numbers of B-21, we've said minimum of 100, objective to 145. We do need to get to a bomber fleet size that can adequately accomplish the missions that we needed to accomplish. So we've been pretty steady on those numbers as well. The B-1, we will keep the B-1 around long enough until the B-21 can shake hands with that, because we need in the interim, we need the long-range strike capability. And the B-2, we'll keep that around long enough until the B-21 can shake hands with that as well, because we need that ability to penetrate into enemy air defense systems. So we're excited right now with the B-21. The development's is going very well on the B-21. I can't get into too many details, the unclassified line on that, but we're excited about the B-21 coming online. Like all legacy systems that we are divesting, the B-1 and the B-2 are no different. I do always have concern as systems age like that, and making sure we can keep those systems effective until the B-21 can take over their service.
Okay, thank you. Well, we will look forward to hearing more details in a classified setting and continuing to follow that progress. Switching a little bit, a recent Hudson report argued that the additional investments in Indo-Pacific airfields, bulk fuel storage, and distribution should be the top priority of any plan to increase investments, airfield capacity. Changes to the tanker portfolio would only have a marginal effect due to the currently limited number of airfields with sufficient runway length, ramp space, and fuel stores that are able to effectively support tanker operations. Furthermore, the airfields the U.S. does have access to are almost all concentrated at major military or civil airfields. I know my colleague, Mr. Gallagher, talked about this a little bit. So do you agree with this pessimistic assessment by Hudson?
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
So I would just say on that we are focused very much on how to expand the range of options in the Indo-Pacific, as the general referred to earlier, as part of the operational imperatives that I also referenced in my opening statement. There is a huge benefit to expanding the range of airfields and locations from which we can operate. I do think from an air refueling perspective, as the general earlier indicated, our situation there, we think we can accomplish our mission with where we are, but from a tactical perspective, there's a lot of benefit from expanding the range of airfields.
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to say I'm not pessimistic about it. There's challenge here, but it's pretty exciting what we're doing in the Pacific right now, and we have a lot of work to do. But I'm certainly not pessimistic because we see a road to get there.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. And Chair now recognizes Mr. Kelly, who's joining us remotely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant General Nahum, thank you for a job exceptionally well done. We appreciate your service to this nation, and we appreciate all the times that you've been on this committee. I, like many of the others, have many concerns about future readiness versus the ability to fight tonight. That's a sliding scale of risk. I feel like in the Strat Air, the bombers, refuelers, and cargo planes that we use, I think you guys have done that better, maybe sometimes with some prompting, but then all of our services across DOD are doing that. So I appreciate the fact that you guys understand the need to be able to fight today and to balance that against the risk of making sure that we can fight the future fights. And so thank you both for doing that, I think, better than we've done across DOD. Lieutenant General Nahum and Mr. Hunter, Mississippi is proudly the home of the 9 C-17 Globemaster III aircraft of the 172nd Air Wing in Jackson, Mississippi. As you're aware, the C-17 is the backbone of our nation's strategic airlift capability, and its unique capabilities and exceptional readiness continue to be called upon around the world, most recently in support of the conflict in Ukraine, and prior to that, during the evacuation of Afghanistan. It's imperative for the warfighter and the national defense strategy that we continue to invest to maintain and improve the capabilities of the C-17. To that end, I've become aware that the aircraft is in urgent need of a flight deck update. The 1980s era cockpit display and the computer avionics have become obsolete and require updates. Failing to do so expeditiously could result in non-mission capable aircraft. I understand the Air Force would prefer to update the flight deck with the latest technology inclusive to open systems architecture with more robust cyber protections and overall reduced parts count. I'm very supportive of the Air Force path, as I believe it will improve operational capability, aircraft readiness, and allow for more efficient future growth. Can you confirm that the Air Force is actively working plans to modernize the C-17 flight deck in the near term? And that's for either.
Sir, I would like to get with you on the details of our modernization approach for the C-17. You are correct that we do have funding program to modernize C-17 specifically for increasing the beyond line of sight capability for the aircraft and meeting the mandates that we have from the FAA and for the comms requirements to make sure that it's up to date with the systems that we have out there. And I would like to get with you on the full details of our RDT&E plan for the aircraft, for the record. General, did you have anything to add?
No, sir. I tell you, the C-17s is just the workhorse, and we know it. And what they did in Afghanistan was truly remarkable. We're committed to it. I tell you, one thing we're watching very closely is how much we fly that airplane, because we've been flying it so heavy over the years. We've got to be careful that that we actually watch that, because at some point we're going to have to replace it if we keep flying at this level. And we want to make sure that we're programmed to do that well. So that's probably one of the things we'll watch closely in the coming years as well.
Mr. Hunter, I would appreciate a follow-up and would love to get detail. We can do that either in a class or non-class environment. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. And Lieutenant General Nahom, I think the first time I met you was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was going through a CAC, and there was a lot going on. I think you were a brigadier general at the time. And I just want to say at all times during my career in Congress where I've bumped into you, either in an operational environment or testifying here before this committee, I just want to reiterate that you've done an exceptional job, and we thank you for that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. You forgot to mention he was born and raised in Connecticut when your comments there. So anyway, so okay, I think we've completed the first round. I know some members want to have used the time that we have left for an additional round of questions. Again, one item which the B-21's been mentioned, and of course can't talk too much detail, but Secretary Kendall, when he was over here, we did have a good exchange regarding just the overall contracting process that was used with B-21, which was a little different than other platforms over the years. And I honestly, I think it is so important to sort of foot stomp that success in terms of just the way software was handled in terms of proprietary ownership, and also looking out at the sustainment tail. And I don't know if you wanted to sort of comment on that, or maybe General Nahom, you've been involved with it as well. But it I don't want to jinx the program, but it does seem like we're really showing some pretty good success in terms of the execution, which originates at the end of the day with the agreement that the government struck with Northrop.
Yeah, I agree. It's an innovative contracting approach, and one of the parts about it that I appreciate quite a bit now, as we're this program has matured, and we're reaching the part where we often run into, or we start to discover some of the engineering challenges that were notional when we start the program, and that become real as you get into the parts of the program that we're currently at. And so the contract structure, what I appreciated about it is the active management approach that was designed in, so that as we identify risks as we go through our engineering analysis, we can use funding to go mitigate those risks and get ahead of the problem and reduce risk early rather than sort of watching it occur. And I think some of the challenges we've talked about with some other aircraft development efforts, particularly those that are fixed price development, is in some cases you can see the problem, but you have very limited means to do anything about it. And with the B-21, I think we've got some good approaches there that have allowed us to get out ahead of that. And that very much, I think, has been to the benefit. There is still some risk because there are fixed price aspects to the program that I will say that has been a great incentive for Northrop to focus on cost, which they have been doing. But there is some risk there that we will see challenges going forward. But overall, I think it is a really good model, the contracting strategy for the B-21 program.
Great. Well, like I said, I hope we're not spiking the ball in the end zone too soon here. But I do think it's a really noteworthy story that Congress, the executive branch, and contractors should really watch and pay attention to. Did you want to say anything, General Nahom, about it? Or?
No, sir, nothing to add to that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I will now yield to Mr. Whitman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant General Nahom, I wanted to get into a little more about the bomber roadmap that you talked about divesting in the B-1 and B-2 and putting our eggs in the basket of B-21 and B-52, obviously B-21 being penetrating strike platform, incredibly capable, and then B-52 being the long-range standoff platform. As we do that, I know that the program that looks to re-engine the B-52 is going to be critical as we move to that two aircraft platform model. The challenge is when we're doing the re-engineering program now, we've seen a 50% increase in the cost of that particular program, and that's of concern both in what it means on the impact on the budget, but also what it means to fully complete that transition and have those aircraft that are available for more years of service. The amazing thing to me is that aircraft has been flying for a number of years. As you know, the newest tail number on many of those aircraft is 60, which means that's the year that it was built, 1960. And the aircraft that are out there today, the pilots that will fly them before they finish their service to the United States in the inventory haven't been born yet. So that aircraft's going to be around for a while. So the re-engineering program is really big as it is part of the bomber roadmap. Give me an idea about these cost increases. Are you doing things to control the cost increases? What can we expect in the future, both in time, schedule, and cost for the B-52 re-engineering program?
And sir, I'm going to let Mr. Hunter comment on this.
Sir, as you know, we've been doing a middle tier of acquisition program to develop a re-engineering approach, prototype a re-engineering a design for the B-52. And I would want to emphasize that a lot of that engineering work is actually inside the airplane and on the support struts to which the engine is attached versus the engine itself, because the engine itself is largely a commercial engine that already exists with a modest number of modifications. So it's really about re-engineering this 1960s aircraft to perform all the way through end of its life, and we have to do it. We won't get there with the current engine. So we've been doing that prototyping program. We're approaching the completion of that work, at which point we'll have an effective, we believe, design that would allow us to actually go into an acquisition program to do the work of re-engineering. So we have a milestone B coming up to make that decision to proceed into the actual production of aircraft that are re-engined aircraft. And at that point, we will understand, we will have in our hands the real full cost of what it's going to take to do it, and we'll set the original baseline for the follow-on program, the re-engineering program, at that point. As you have pointed out, we currently believe that there is cost growth from our design work that we did originally through the middle tier of acquisition program to what we anticipate we'll be looking at when we get to milestone B. And then we'll have to assess, does it still make sense to move forward with that program? However, as I said, we will need a new engine for the B-52 to get it out to its full lifetime.
Are you putting in place cost controls to prevent any further cost growth?
We will be looking at the acquisition strategy to make sure that we have an effective means to control cost on the B-52 engineering program. And as the kind of prior discussion with Chairman Courtney indicated, I think there's some good lessons learned from some of our other recent major programs of tools that we want to look at for that acquisition strategy.
I hope as you look at that, that you not only look at the re-engineering cost, but also the life cycle costs. I think those things are incredibly important too. So I'd love to hear back from you as you develop those cost controls and how you do that over the life cycle of the engine. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Whitman. Chair, now recognize Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to follow up once again, Mr. Whitman, talking about the B-52 program, the cost controls. The engine has been selected, correct?
Yes, sir.
So as you're doing the structural, again, it's a little bit older, right? Old doesn't mean bad, because if it was, none of us would be here. But when we look at the structurals, you know what it takes to upgrade it for the new engine and the torque for a lifetime. But as you open up the different planes, are you including a cost factor for surprises that you might not be able to see, or do you have a pretty good handle on what each of the aircraft, I guess, condition is structurally?
Yeah, as we go through that with the contractor to come up with a cost for the program, the government will independently analyze that, and we will absolutely try to factor in room for surprises, given the age of the aircraft and the complexity of what we're asking to be done there. And it's you know, the overall contractor for the program is Boeing, different contractor for the engine that we're buying, but we're working with both. So we'll have the best engineering knowledge that we can find, including the government engineering knowledge on this aircraft, which is extensive as we put together those estimates.
Thank you. One of the most remarkable planes ever designed. And I don't want to get into it. I don't have a Boeing. I don't have Airbus in my district. I don't have a base. But the availability rate of the KC-46 is the highest of any refueling plane in our for availability. It does fly 85% of the mission. So we get that. We understand that we like competition. This was a fixed price contract. Boeing has taken it on the chin. If we held the standard that some folks are talking about on this to some of our other platforms, our ships, they would never make it out of the dry dock. Let's just bring down the tone. Let's talk about what we need as a country to make sure they get refueled, that we're competitive, getting the best price for America. And I thank all of us, and I have a great deal of respect for my colleagues. We talk about this all the time. But the most important thing is what we deliver for those warfighters when they need it. Now you'll back bounce my time.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. The chair now recognizes Mr. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hunter, were you originally involved in the original contract on this KC-46 back 9-10 years ago in any way?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Thank you. Quick question. What do these four aircraft have in common? A KE-46A, XL, I think that's UUV. I might be wrong on that one. A TF and a VC-25B. What do those four have in common?
Well, I recognize two of those are Boeing aircraft. I'm going to guess the other two are Boeing products as well.
Yeah, the good guess. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. They're over-promised, under-delivered, over-cost. It all falls in the same category. And I'm sorry for my simple mentality here sometime, but, you know, I almost feel like, you know, I feel like I'm going to the refrigerator and I'm pulling out a jug of milk and I pour a glass full of it and it's all clabbered and I drink it and it's nasty and I put it back in the refrigerator and I wait a month and go back and try it again thinking it's going to be better. That's the way I feel on this KC-46 project. I feel like we just keep waiting for it to get better and it keeps getting worse. General, can this KC-46 today, can it refuel a B-2 bomber?
Sir, I had to check my notes. On the bomber fleet, it can refuel B-52 It is not certified for B1 or B2 yet.
Okay.
And that's because we have
So
not.
our
gotten the testing
long-range
yet.
capabilities are limited by this aircraft.
I was going to revisit that, sir, because he is correct. It has not been certified. What I was referring to is we aren't aware of any technical issue today that would prevent that certification from happening when the test flight schedule allows for it.
Okay. How long do you think that's going to take?
It should be fairly soon.
Yeah, the testing's happening.
Well,
as we speak, sir.
again, it's like that clabbered milk in the refrigerator. We keep passing it on and keep going back to it and thinking it's going to get better. And I'm sorry, I'm taking my frustrations out on you. I know it's not you, but I think our bidding contract, and I understand overruns. I truly do. And we want to keep every shipyard. We want to keep every plane manufacturer. I am not anti-anybody. We want to keep them in business. We want to keep them healthy. But when we put all our eggs in one basket, it seems like, and things start deteriorating, and we want to keep putting them back in that same basket, those apples are going to come out rotten sooner or later. So we have to be careful. In our bid process, when we're talking about the lives of our airmen here and now, we're going to buy the cheapest product to put them in, and that's what it's based on. But yet, from a taxpayer standpoint, at the end of the project, we've paid a lot more than originally started. That wasn't a good contract. So maybe the problem is the contract in between.
Sir, I will say on this case, the government has paid what we anticipated originally, but there has been cost overruns, and the contractor has borne most of those cost overruns.
Well, again, when I bid something, I expect a product that works 100% of the time, and I'm not going to go back into that. I think that'll be tacky, and I'm a lot of things, I think, but not tacky. Now, who's laughing down there about me not being tacky? Okay, all right, that's my buddy. I love it. Can you give me that time frame again, where you think this contract's going to play out?
This would be the time frame on the KCY decision,
Yes,
sir, that we were referencing
Yes.
earlier. Yes. So we anticipate that the business case analysis and the requirements approval that we need from our requirements committee will come in the fall
Fall
of this
year?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And I return my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, from the tacky one down here on the end.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. We don't think you're tacky at all. So anyway, does any members, Ms. Garcia, Rob, you're okay? Okay, good. So again, I think we've had a good discussion and given us a lot of good things to chew over as we get closer to the mark. Again, I want to thank the witnesses for joining us this early, and in particular, General Nahom. This sounds like this may be your last waltz in front of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee, but we definitely just want to join the other colleagues in really thanking you for always being accessible and available and explaining things in plain English. And again, for your amazing service, and wish you all the best in whatever's the next chapter. And again, thank you again, Mr. Hunter, for joining us. And with that, I declare this hearing closed.